It always starts with a memory. A vague one. The sound of my sister laughing behind a closed door. My mother's voice, stern and muffled. Me standing outside, 7 years old, clutching a crayon and a half-finished drawing. I remember thinking, did I do something wrong? That's the thing. I always thought it was me. They used to say I was the difficult one, the sensitive one, the one who made things complicated. Emma, my sister, she was the golden child. Smart, obedient, smile always on cue. I used to watch her glide through life like she was playing a role written just for her. Meanwhile, I was the girl who spilled milk, who cried too loud, who asked too many questions. By the time I was 15, I'd learned to stop speaking during dinner. Not because I didn't have anything to say. God, I had so much to say. But because every word I spoke felt like an argument I was doomed to lose. If Emma interrupted me, she was passionate. If I did the same, rude. Unladylike. Difficult. What do you do when your entire identity feels like a rebuttal? When I left for college, I promised myself I'd never go back. But life isn't that kind. Not when your family's dysfunction is wrapped in polite smiles and we just want what's best. Not when guilt masquerades as love. I was 39 when I returned. Older, wiser, married. I thought I'd made peace with the past. I was wrong. Because nothing ever really changes in that house. The curtains might be new, the furniture rearranged, but the air? Still thick with judgment and unspoken rules. And Emma? Oh, she hadn't changed a bit. Still graceful. Still adored. Still capable of making me feel like I was losing my mind. Slowly, quietly, one polite conversation at a time. But this time, I wasn't a child. And this time, I was watching everything. It was a Thursday afternoon when the phone rang. I was in the kitchen, peeling potatoes, of all things. The kind of chore that feels almost meditative until reality creeps in. My husband Mark was upstairs, probably still on that endless Zoom call, and I remember looking at the screen. Mom. Just that. All caps. Like an announcement or a warning. I almost didn't answer. I let it ring until the last second, until guilt wrapped itself around my ribs like barbed wire. That's how they get you, you know? Not with screaming or slamming doors, but with silence, expectation. The idea that you're the one who should pick up, even after everything. She sounded frail. Not weak, but deliberately fragile. That voice she used when she wanted something, but wouldn't say it outright. Your father had a fall, she said, her voice tight with performative concern. Emma's been run ragged taking care of things. There it was. Emma. Again. I asked if he was okay. She said yes. It was just a tumble, but the doctor had advised he take it easy. I asked why they hadn't called me sooner. She paused, just long enough to make it sting, then said, "We didn't want to bother you. You're so busy, and Emma's already here, and—" I cut her off, said I'd come. Mark raised his eyebrows when I told him. You sure? He asked. He knew what going back meant, or at least part of it. He'd only met my parents twice, both times strained and full of undercurrents. I'll drive you, he added, and I remember snapping, I'm not a child. Just like that, harsh, immediate. I hated how fast I defaulted to defensiveness. I was already turning into the girl I used to be in that house. The drive took 4 hours. My hands clenched the wheel the whole way, knuckles pale, the radio low. Static filled the car more than music. I couldn't stop thinking. What if this time was different? What if Emma had grown up too? What if my mother had softened, my father mellowed? The house looked exactly the same. The roses still overtrimmed, the lawn too neat, as if perfection could mask rot. Emma opened the door. She looked great, of course, pulled together, pressed blouse, no hair out of place. And her voice, oh, that syrupy, passive-aggressive tone she used to perfection. Oh, you came, she said, smiling just enough. Mom wasn't sure if you would. A flash, a flicker. Just like that, the old dynamic snapped back into place. Me the unreliable one, her the martyr. I felt my jaw clench, but I just nodded and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Lemon polish and something old underneath. Time, dust, memory. Dad was in the living room, legs up, blanket over him like a crown. He waved. "There's our runaway." He meant it as a joke. He always meant it as a joke. But jokes have teeth. Dinner that night was unbearable. Emma talked about her job, her boyfriend, whom I'd never met, how exhausting it had been juggling hospital visits and groceries and managing the accounts. My mother chimed in with proud smiles and soft gasps, like Emma had crossed a desert to bring them water. I picked at my food. Mark texted, "You okay?" I wasn't, because I knew the script. I'd lived it for years. And now I was back in the role of the difficult daughter. Older, yes, but still the scapegoat in a play I didn't write, and I hadn't even unpacked my suitcase yet. I didn't sleep, not even a little. The mattress was the same one from when I was a teenager, too soft in the middle, springs groaning like old bones every time I shifted. The room smelled of lavender sachets and something faintly sour, like years of unopened windows and bottled memories. The closet still held a few of my old clothes, as if I might come back and slip right into who I used to be. A denim jacket with a hole in the sleeve. A scarf I wore every day sophomore year. Ghosts of myself lined up on hangers. Down the hall, I could hear them, Emma and Mom, laughing. Low, private laughter, like secrets folded between sentences. That was always their thing. The quiet intimacy that excluded me not with cruelty, but with kindness. And somehow, that always hurt more. By morning, I felt hungover on exhaustion and emotion. I came downstairs to the smell of toast and Emma's bright voice. She was wearing one of Mom's aprons, flipping pancakes like we were on a wholesome cooking show. Dad was reading the paper like nothing had changed since 1997. "Morning, sleepyhead," she said, with a smirk that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Rough night?" I muttered something and sat down. Mom slid a plate in front of me without asking what I wanted. "Strawberry jam. I hate strawberry jam. Always have. But they never remember. Or maybe they do. Maybe it's just easier to pretend I'm someone I'm not." Halfway through breakfast, Emma dropped it. Casually, like it wasn't the real reason I'd been summoned. "So, Mom and Dad have been thinking about downsizing," she said, sipping her tea. "You know, with Dad's health and all, too much space, too many stairs." I blinked. "Okay?" Mom folded her napkin like she was pressing something into place. "We're thinking about selling the house." Ah, there it was. The real reason. They wanted to hand over the keys to someone else. Maybe a couple with young kids. Maybe someone who'd repaint the walls and strip away every memory that ever made me. But what caught in my throat wasn't the idea of selling. It was the assumption that Emma had been the one helping with everything, that I'd be told, not consulted, a guest in the place I was born. "And what happens to all the stuff?" I asked. "The photos? The boxes in the attic? Dad's workshop?" Emma smiled, sweet and rehearsed. "That's why we're glad you came. Thought you might want to help sort through things." Of course, the cleanup crew, not the decision-maker, just the daughter who'd carry the weight, again, quietly, while Emma took the credit. I excused myself, said I needed air, and walked out to the backyard. The garden looked the same. The old swing set rusted but still standing, like some relic of forgotten joy. I sat on the bench by the hydrangeas, clenched fists in my lap, and I felt it. That familiar swirl. Anger, guilt, confusion. Like I was 16 again, trying to scream underwater. What made it worse was that part of me still wanted their approval, still ached for it. I wanted my mom to ask how I was really doing. I wanted my dad to say he was proud of me. I wanted Emma to see me as something more than a burden or threat. I hated that I cared. But I did. God help me, I did. And that's when it clicked. This wasn't just about sorting boxes or saying goodbye to a house. It was about control. Emma wanted to orchestrate the end of our childhood like she'd orchestrated everything else, with her at the center and me at the edge, blurry and disposable. But not this time. This time, I was watching. And this time, I wasn't going to stay quiet. The garage always smelled like oil and sawdust, like time itself had hardened in the air and settled into every crack. My dad's workbench sat under a crooked shelf, coated in years of dust. I don't think anyone had touched it in ages. There were jars of screws sorted by size, old paintbrushes stiff with dried color, and a busted radio that still had a sticky note on it. "Fix me." I wasn't sure why I went in there. Maybe I was looking for something. Maybe I just needed to breathe where no one else would follow. I started pulling open drawers, half expecting nothing, half hoping for everything. Mostly it was junk. Receipts from hardware stores, rusted bolts, a flashlight with dead batteries. Then, in the back of the bottom drawer, I found a stack of yellowed index cards held together with a rubber band. On top, in faint pencil, it said, "Kitchen Talk, 1999. I froze. That was the year Emma got caught stealing from the corner store. She told everyone it was a misunderstanding, that the clerk was rude, that she forgot to pay. I remember the tension, the hushed conversations, the way Mom cried in the laundry room when she thought no one was listening. And I remember being blamed for creating tension in the house by being overly observant. The index cards were notes, fragments of overheard conversations, dates, details. My dad had written them. Lines like, "She said she didn't mean to, but the lipstick was in her bag before they left. M wants to sweep it under the rug. Said we owe her this one. S asked if she could say something. M shut her down." S. That was me. I knew it. I felt it in my bones. I flipped through more. There were notes about arguments, about Emma skipping school, about me acting out after. But the tone, it wasn't cruel. It was observant, careful. My dad had been documenting everything, like he didn't trust what he was being told. Like maybe, just maybe, he had seen what was really happening. I sat down on the floor, knees pulled to my chest, holding the cards like they might vanish. My whole life I thought he didn't notice, that he just accepted the narrative my mother and Emma painted. I was emotional, unstable, jealous. But these cards, they were small, quiet proof that maybe he did see me. He just never said it out loud. And that? That hurt worse than anything. He watched. He knew. And still, he let them make me into the villain. Later that night, I asked him, casually, cautiously, if he remembered writing notes for his projects. He shrugged, didn't look up from the TV. "I used to jot stuff down. Helps clear the mind." That was all he said. But when I stood to leave, he added, "Sometimes it's easier to keep the peace than to speak the truth." That was it. No apology, no clarity. Just another coded message in a family fluent in avoidance. I wanted to scream, to throw the index cards in his lap and ask why he never defended me, why he let them reshape me into something I wasn't. But I didn't, because screaming never worked in that house. It only confirmed what they already believed about me, that I was difficult, dramatic, intense. So I walked out, and I kept the cards, proof, evidence, a quiet ledger of my reality, not theirs. And in that moment, I decided something I never thought I would. I was going to stay, not for them, not to help, but to watch, to listen, to document, the way he had. I wasn't the problem. I never was. And now? Now I had the receipts. I didn't sleep again. But this time, it wasn't insomnia. It was adrenaline. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the index cards fanned out across the quilt beside me, like evidence at a crime scene. My hands itched to do something. Sort, underline, scream. But instead, I memorized the words. Swept under the rug. Asked to stay quiet. Didn't want to ruin Emma's chances. I wasn't imagining it all those years. I wasn't crazy. At breakfast, Emma was already at the table, glowing as usual. My mother floated between the toaster and the sink, humming an old dusty Springfield song. My dad sat in his recliner in the next room, half listening to the TV, half listening to us. "Could you handle the linen closet today?" Emma asked, pouring herself more coffee like we were in some HGTV home-flipping fantasy. "Mom's got a system going, but it's a bit chaotic." I nodded, slow. "Sure," I said, "but later, you and I should talk." She blinked. That perfect smile faltered for half a second, then returned. "Of course. Anything on your mind?" Too much. We met in the backyard after lunch. Same spot where we used to play dress-up. Same rusted swing set in the background like a set piece no one wanted to strike. I held the cards in my pocket. I wasn't sure I'd show them, not yet, but I wanted them near. Like armor. Emma wore that lavender sweater she always packed for family visits. Soft, calculated nostalgia. She tucked her hair behind her ear and looked at me like she already knew what I was about to say. That smug, preemptive innocence that made me want to rip up the grass beneath my feet. "So," she said, folding her arms, "what's up?" I stared at her. "Do you remember the lipstick?" Her face didn't flinch, just a blink. "What?" 1999. You took a lipstick from McCleary's. Mom cried for a week. I got grounded because I stirred things up by asking too many questions. A pause. Then, "That was forever ago." "So you do remember." Emma sighed. "God, are we really doing this? That was high school. I made a stupid mistake. You blew it out of proportion, like always." Like always. I swallowed hard. "Dad wrote it down," I said. "He kept notes. I found them." That got her. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. "Why?" I asked. "Why was it always me who paid the price? Why did they let you make mistake after mistake and still get a gold star while I couldn't even cry without it becoming a federal case?" Emma laughed. Short, sharp. "You were obsessed with being the victim." "No," I snapped. "I was obsessed with being believed. There's a difference." She turned away. "You think you were the only one hurting? You think being the favorite came without pressure? Without expectations?" "I would have killed for expectations instead of blame," I said. My voice cracked. I hated that it cracked. Emma bit her lip. She looked older suddenly, tired. "They were scared of you," she said, quiet. "You were volatile, emotional. They didn't know what to do with you." I flinched. "So they punished me for having feelings?" She didn't answer. She just stared past me, like she was watching some memory I couldn't access. "We all just wanted peace," she whispered. "And you got it," I said, "by making me the war." We stood there in silence. Not closure. Not forgiveness. Just silence. And for the first time in years, I wasn't trying to fill it. The kitchen smelled like lemons and starch, like everything had been scrubbed one too many times. My mother stood at the counter, folding dish towels like she was performing surgery. Every corner matched. Every crease exact. It was the kind of control that made you feel like even your breath could wrinkle the room. I sat down at the table and placed the index cards between us. She didn't look at them. She didn't even look at me. "We need to talk," I said, still folding. "You knew," I continued. "You had to know what you were doing." A pause, then a soft, practiced sigh. "If this is about the attic again?" "It's not." I tapped the cards. Dad kept notes, about everything. Emma, the lipstick, the punishments, me. She froze. Her hands hovered over the towel like they weren't sure what to do now that they'd been seen. "I found them," I said. "He saw it, all of it, and he stayed silent. But you—" "I did what I had to do," she snapped, eyes finally lifting to meet mine. Sharp, controlled. That look I'd known since childhood. "I am the mother. You are the problem." "You picked a side," I said, voice low. "And it was never mine." She turned to the sink, turned her back to me. "You were always volatile." "Stop saying that," I said. "Stop rewriting history to make yourself feel better." She braced her hands on the counter. "You don't understand how hard it was. You were emotional, sensitive, always needing more than I had to give. So you gave it to Emma. She didn't ask for so much." My heart was pounding, but I didn't look away. "She didn't have to. You just handed it to her." She turned then. Her face was flushed, but not with regret, with frustration, with something worse, justification. "You were exhausting," she said. "From the time you were little, always crying, always questioning everything, never satisfied. Emma was easy. Emma didn't make me feel like a failure every time I walked into a room." I sat back, and there it was. Not guilt, not remorse. Just blame, gift wrapped in maternal fatigue. "You failed," I said softly. Because you couldn't love two children differently without making one the villain. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she blinked them away like weakness wasn't allowed. You always wanted too much. No, I said, standing. I wanted enough. You just decided I didn't deserve it. We stood there for a long time. Not mother and daughter, just two women, one tired of being misunderstood, the other too scared to admit she did the misunderstanding. I'm not helping sell this house, I said, and I'm not cleaning up your mess. You want to bury the past? Do it without my hands. I walked out before she could answer, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the difficult one. I felt like the only honest person in the room. I sat at the rest stop for almost an hour. Engine off, phone face down on the passenger seat. My hands resting in my lap like they didn't know what to hold anymore. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even angry. I felt hollow, like my body had finally caught up to what my heart had been screaming for years, that you can leave a place and still be haunted by it. That distance doesn't always mean detachment. The box of old drawings was in the trunk. So were the yearbooks, the broken diary, and one of Dad's index cards I kept for myself. I didn't know why I chose that one. Maybe because it said so little, but everything. S asked if she could speak. M said, "Not now. She'll make it worse." That was my whole childhood in 12 words. I kept thinking, what now? What do you do after a war no one admits happened? What do you do with all the invisible scars? I could burn the drawings, throw out the yearbooks, pretend none of it mattered. Or I could put it all in a box, label it past, and shove it in the back of a closet. But neither of those felt right. Too dramatic or too cowardly. And for once, I didn't want to be either. I turned the engine back on and drove. Not home, not yet. I stopped at a little diner an hour outside the city, the kind with cracked leather booths and waitresses who call you honey whether you're 12 or 70. I ordered coffee and toast and sat in silence while other people lived their normal lives around me. A teenage couple fighting in whispers. A man in a flannel shirt reading a worn-out paperback. An old woman eating soup alone, so slowly it made time feel sacred. No one knew who I was. No one knew what I'd just walked away from. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safety. Not from the world, but from myself. I wasn't bracing for impact. I wasn't trying to fix anyone or decode the emotional temperature of a room. I was just sitting, being. After a while, I took out a napkin and started writing. Not a letter, not a journal entry, just thoughts, fragments, like those index cards, only mine. I was not too much. I was not the problem. Silence is not peace. Love that demands silence is not love. I don't need them to believe me. I just need to believe me. And when the waitress refilled my coffee and smiled, I almost cried. Not because I was sad, but because I realized I could finally feel things without checking the room for permission. That was freedom. Not loud, not cinematic, just quiet, just mine. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the sky had turned the color of wet ash. Not stormy, not sunny, just soft, honest. Mark was waiting at the door. He opened it before I even reached the steps. No questions, just arms. And I let myself fall into them, not out of fragility, but because I didn't have to hold the weight anymore. Not alone. We didn't talk much that night. He made pasta. I took a long shower. I unpacked slowly, not because I was avoiding anything, but because there was no rush. The box of drawings went in the hall closet. The yearbooks in the office. The napkin I'd written my truths on, I pinned it above my desk, right next to a post-it Mark had written months ago. You don't have to be easy to deserve love. The next morning, I emailed a therapist. I didn't use flowery language. I just wrote, I'm not okay, but I'm not lost. I'd like help building from here. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel embarrassed for needing help. I felt smart for asking. I didn't block my family. I didn't write a dramatic letter. I didn't torch bridges. I just let the phone calls go to voicemail. The texts, unanswered. Maybe one day I'll pick up. Maybe I won't. But I finally realized that protecting myself isn't cruelty. It's survival. A week later, Emma emailed. Not a novel, not an apology. Just a line. I've been thinking, a lot. I didn't see it before. I'm sorry. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't respond. Not out of spite. Out of peace. I wasn't looking for her to bleed for me. I wasn't hungry for her guilt anymore. She can do her own work. I've got mine. I started painting again. Not seriously. Just messily. I bought cheap brushes, let the colors smear. Nothing had to be pretty. Nothing had to be seen. I went back to that diner once a week. Same booth, same waitress. I started bringing a notebook, writing fragments, pieces of my own story, but softer, more whole. Not about what they did, but who I am despite it. The house? They sold it. I saw the listing online. They changed the wallpaper, tore out the swing set, repainted the porch. It looked better, but emptier. And not just because I wasn't in it. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed, if I'd kept folding towels and swallowing pain like medicine. But then I remember that girl in the attic, the one who drew sisters holding hands. She didn't want revenge. She just wanted someone to see her. So I do. Every day. I see her. And that's enough.